"No, it still hurts down there," the young Apache woman said. "The rancher did it and ended up with a wife." The wind howled across the valley, stirring dust and whispers from the dry plains. The sun had just begun to sink behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows over the land. It was a land alive with stories, a place where every rock, every tree seemed to carry the weight of memory and pain. And in the heart of this valley lived Ayanna, a young Apache woman whose spirit was as wild and unbroken as the land itself, but whose heart bore a wound no one could see. Ayanna's pain was not only physical. It lingered deep within her, tied to a curse passed down through generations. The villagers whispered of it in hushed tones, speaking of a sorrow that would not fade, of a woman who could not trust, and of a land that would not forgive. Yet Ayanna carried herself with quiet strength, moving through the world like a shadow among shadows, her dark eyes alert to every movement, every sound. On the outskirts of the valley, there lived a rancher named Ethan. He was a man of few words and steady hands, known for his skill with both horses and the land. But beneath his calm exterior was a heart that felt more than most. He had seen pain before, loss that never healed, heartbreak that lingered like the ghosts of old storms. And he had heard of Ayanna, not through gossip, but through the whispers of the land itself, which seemed to call to him in ways he could not understand. Their first meeting was not dramatic. Ayanna had been walking along a narrow trail, her feet stirring up dust that shimmered in the evening light. She sensed him before she saw him, a presence that was solid and unyielding like the mountains themselves. When she turned, their eyes met. Ethan did not speak at first. He simply stood there, hands resting lightly on the fence post, watching her. "I've heard about the curse," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "I didn't come to frighten you, I came to help." Ayanna's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not trust words, especially not those spoken by men. "You don't understand," she said softly, almost to herself. "No one does." Ethan stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "Maybe not yet, but I can try. I know pain when I see it, and I know strength when I see it too. You have both." For a long moment she studied him. Something in his gaze was different. There was no judgment, no desire to control, just quiet, patient presence. Slowly she allowed herself to nod. It was the smallest gesture, but it was the first sign of trust she had shown in years. The days that followed were uneasy. Ayanna and Ethan spent time together under the wide sky, working on the ranch, walking the trails and listening to the land. She was wary, always alert, but she could not deny the subtle pull she felt toward him. The land itself seemed to respond to their presence, the wind carrying their shared laughter and the animals settling in their company. But the curse was never far from her mind. At night, when the sky was dark and the stars glimmered like distant fires, she felt its weight most keenly. She would lie awake, listening to the whispers of the wind, hearing echoes of past pain that clung to her bones. And it was in those moments that the land reminded her of its power, of the spirits that lingered in every shadow, waiting to test her, to remind her of the suffering she carried. Ethan noticed the change in her, the way her eyes sometimes filled with fear when the wind shifted, or when a shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should. He did not ask questions. He did not push. He simply stayed, offering silent support, showing her that someone could stand with her, rather than against her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Ayanna felt the familiar stirrings of the curse. Her body trembled and a sharp ache reminded her of the pain she had carried for so long. She sank to the ground, pressing her hands to the earth as if she could anchor herself. Ethan knelt beside her. "It hurts, doesn't it?" he asked gently. She did not answer immediately. Her voice was a whisper, heavy with unshed tears. "Yes, it still hurts," she admitted. "Down there, it never goes away." He nodded slowly, understanding without needing explanation. "Then we face it together," he said. "You don't have to bear it alone." For the first time, she allowed herself to lean against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. It was not comfort born of magic or words, but of something deeper, a recognition that some wounds could not be healed alone. But the land had its own plans. That night a storm rose over the valley, sudden and fierce. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the mountains in stark, white light. The wind roared like a living thing, bending the trees and shaking the earth. Yana woke to the sound, heart pounding, and stepped outside, drawn by a force she could not name. The valley was alive with spirits. Shadows twisted and danced across the ground, forming shapes she recognized from her past, faces of those who had hurt her, and those she had loved and lost. Iyana's heart clenched as she saw them, the ache of old memories pressing against her chest. Ethan followed closely, moving with careful steps through the chaos. He reached her just as a shadow loomed large before her, taking the form of a figure she had feared for years. The apparition spoke without words, its presence pressing down on her. "He will be the one to heal or destroy you," Yana gasped, stumbling back. Ethan's hand caught hers, steady and unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "I will not leave you, not now, not ever." But the shadow did not move. It lingered, a reminder that the curse was not simply pain, it was choice. It demanded that she face her fear, confront the betrayal and sorrow she had carried for so long, and decide whether she could allow someone to stand with her. Yana looked into Ethan's eyes, searching for certainty, searching for truth. She saw his courage reflected in the storm, in the way he did not flinch despite the darkness surrounding them. And for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, tiny and fragile but unmistakable. The wind screamed around them, carrying the whispers of the land. Animals cried out in alarm, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet. Yet Ethan and Ayana stood together, hand in hand, facing the tempest. In that moment, the ache in her body, the pain she had carried for so long, felt a little lighter. Not gone, but shared, and for the first time that made all the difference. But even as they clung to one another, the shadow remained. Its whisper echoed in the corners of her mind, chilling and certain. The land remembers, and it will not forgive easily. Yana swallowed hard, taking a deep breath. She could not yet see the end of the storm, nor the path that lay ahead. But she knew one thing: she was no longer alone, and perhaps, just perhaps, that was the first step toward freedom. As the storm raged, the wind carried a new sound, a low, mournful wail that seemed to come from the mountains themselves. Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. "We will face it," he said, "together." Yana nodded, her heart pounding, her spirit trembling, but something deep within her stirred. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life not defined solely by pain and fear, a life where trust could exist, where love could exist, where she could be free. And yet, as the lightning split the sky, casting eerie shadows across the valley, a final thought pressed into her mind, chilling her to the core. The land was alive, and it was watching, waiting, and the curse was far from over. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that the real trial was only beginning. Cliffhanger. It pulsed with a dark energy, and etched into its surface were words she could feel rather than read. "The path has begun. The shadow will come again." She held it tightly in her hand, heart racing. Ethan looked at her, eyes wide with concern and determination. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together." And somewhere in the valley, the land whispered back, its voice low and ancient, "Let the trial begin." The valley woke under a sky streaked with bruised purples and deep golds. The storm from the night before had passed, but the land did not seem the same. Trees bent slightly as if bowing to an unseen presence, and the rivers moved with a restless energy that made the reeds sway like dancing shadows. Gianna walked along the ridge of the hill, feeling the weight of the feather Ethan had left in her hand. It pulsed faintly, as if alive, reminding her that the curse and the land were far from dormant. Ethan followed quietly, his steps sure and steady on the rocky path. His presence was a silent anchor for her, a reminder that even as the land tested her, she did not have to face it alone. He had spent the morning talking to the villagers, gathering fragments of stories about the curse, learning its patterns, and listening to the land's whispers as carefully as he listened to Ayanna. "We need to understand it," he said gently, catching up to her. "Not just the curse, but how it moves, how it reacts to you. It is tied to the land, and it is tied to you." Ayanna kept her gaze on the valley below, the golden rivers winding like threads of light. "I know," she said softly. "I've felt it all my life. But I don't know if it can ever be lifted. It feels too old, too strong." Ethan reached out, lightly brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Nothing is stronger than the heart, Ayanna, yours and mine. Together we can face it." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the truth in his eyes. He did not claim to have all the answers, but he had faith in her. And for the first time, she felt a flicker of courage ignite within her. Their journey led them to the edge of a forest that bordered the valley. It was an ancient place, where twisted trees grew tall and close, their roots entwined like sleeping serpents beneath the earth. Legends spoke of spirits that roamed here, guardians of the land's secrets and sometimes of its curses. "This is where the signs are strongest," Ethan said. "We must enter carefully. The forest will test us, not just your power but your trust in me." Ayanna swallowed, feeling the old fear curl in her stomach. Her instinct was to flee, to run back to the open plains where she could see the sky and the horizon. But something deeper, a part of her that had been buried under years of pain, wanted to see this through. Together they stepped into the forest. The air grew cooler, heavy with the scent of moss and earth. Light filtered through the dense canopy in soft, green beams, illuminating the dust that floated like tiny spirits. Shadows moved at the edge of vision, and the forest seemed alive with whispered voices, speaking in a language she could almost understand. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman-shaped apparition with eyes like black mirrors. Ayanna froze, heart pounding. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice trembling but firm. The apparition did not speak. Instead, it moved closer, and the air grew thick with the weight of her presence. Then, as if recognizing Ayanna, it stretched out a hand toward her and whispered in a voice that was both hers and not hers, "You carry the pain of many lifetimes. You cannot trust. You cannot love. The land remembers your fear." Ayanna stepped back, gripping Ethan's hand tightly. His presence was steady, a reminder that she was not alone. "You are not real," Ethan said softly, his voice calm. "You are a shadow, a test. You cannot hurt her." The apparition's eyes flashed, and the ground beneath their feet shifted as though the forest itself was alive. Trees groaned, roots wriggling, and the leaves whispered with voices both human and spectral. Ayanna felt the familiar ache of the curse, sharp and insistent, pressing into her very bones. I can't control it," she cried, fear rising. "Yes, you can," Ethan said firmly. "Remember, it is your power as much as it is your fear. Control it, or it will control you. I am here with you. Focus on us, not the shadows." Ayanna closed her eyes, letting his words anchor her. She imagined their hands joined, their hearts connected, and slowly the forest's pressure began to ease. The apparition wavered, uncertain, as Ayanna drew strength from her trust in Ethan. You are stronger than your fear," the shadow whispered finally, and then it dissolved into mist, leaving the forest quiet, almost reverent. They continued deeper into the trees, the path narrowing and the air thickening with power. Here, the curse's presence was stronger. The ground pulsed beneath their feet, and the wind carried faint cries of past wrongs and lost hopes. "This is the heart of it," Ethan said, pointing to a clearing ahead. In the center was a small pool of water, dark as obsidian, reflecting the sky above in twisted, broken fragments. "The source. It will test you, Ayanna, but you are ready." Ayanna approached cautiously. The surface of the water rippled and she saw visions, memories of betrayal, of pain inflicted and endured, of moments when she had felt powerless. Her heart ached at the images, tears pricking her eyes. "You must face this," Ethan said softly. "Not as a victim, but as the person you are meant to become. Do not run. Do not hide." Taking a deep breath, Ayanna stepped closer, letting the water's reflection fill her vision. She saw herself, not broken or scared, but brave and strong. She saw Ethan beside her, steadfast and unwavering, and she realized that for the first time she was not alone in her pain. The reflection shifted suddenly, showing a darker vision, Ethan hurting her, abandoning her, a nightmare born from her deepest fear. Yana staggered, heart racing, unsure if she could bear it. "You will not let it happen," Ethan said firmly, moving to her side. "I am here. I will not leave you. Trust me, trust us." Her breath caught and slowly, trembling, she nodded. She reached out and touched the water. Instantly, the visions changed. The dark images receded, replaced by light. Memories of pain and fear transformed into images of courage and love, of resilience and hope. The curse had not disappeared, but its power had shifted. It was no longer a force meant to control her. It was a mirror of her own strength. Gianna looked at Ethan, heart pounding. I think I understand," she whispered. "It's never just about the curse. It's about how I face it." Ethan smiled, a small, gentle expression that lit his eyes. "Exactly, and you are not facing it alone." For a moment they stood in silence, the forest around them quiet, almost respectful. Then a sudden chill swept through the clearing. The water in the pool shimmered unnaturally, and a voice, low and dangerous, echoed from its depths. "You may have faced the first trial, but the tide has only begun to rise." Yana shivered, instinctively stepping closer to Ethan. "The tide?" she asked. "The curse is not just yours," he said, voice grave. "It is tied to the land itself, to generations of pain. We have only scratched the surface. There will be more tests, more shadows, and it will demand more from you, from us." Her stomach twisted, fear and determination mingling. "Then we face it," she said firmly. "Together." Ethan nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Together," he agreed. As they left the forest and walked back toward the open valley, the wind picked up, carrying whispers from the mountains. The animals watched silently, and the trees seemed to bow in acknowledgement of what had occurred. The land was alive, and it had noticed their courage. But the valley's peace was fleeting. In the distance, atop the highest ridge, a figure watched, a shadowed presence, tall and silent, its eyes gleaming with a dark light. It had observed their progress and now moved like mist across the hills, waiting for the moment when fear could be sown again. Iana sensed it before she saw it, a prickling at the edge of her awareness. "Something is watching," she murmured, her hand tightening on Ethan's. "Yes," he replied, his jaw set, "and we will face it when the time comes. Whatever comes next, we are ready. We will not run." That night, as they camped under the stars, the feather pulsed in Ayana's hand. The soft glow illuminated her face as she turned it over, feeling its strange warmth. Words appeared once more, faint but clear. "The tide rises. Prepare your heart." She looked at Ethan, his face serene despite the tension of the day. "I don't know what it means," she whispered. Ethan reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with hers. "It means the path ahead will test us further," he said. "But I am with you, always, and together we will rise above it." Yana nodded, the weight in her chest easing slightly. She still felt the ache, the remnants of the curse, but for the first time she also felt hope. And she knew, deep in her soul, that the true battle had only just begun. As the stars blinked overhead, the valley breathed around them. The wind carried a new sound, distant, like waves crashing against hidden cliffs, a reminder that the curse was patient, relentless, and far from over. And somewhere beyond the mountains, in the shadow of the forest, the watcher stirred, moving closer with silent intent, its presence promising that the tides of power were about to surge. and that Ayanna and Ethan's bond would be tested in ways neither could yet imagine. Cliffhanger. The land itself seems to wait, hungry to see if they can withstand the storm to come. The morning fog hung thick over the valley, curling around the trees like restless spirits. Ayanna awoke to a silence that felt heavier than any storm. Ethan had gone ahead to check the perimeter, but she sensed more than saw the change in the air. The valley was waiting. The land itself, patient and ancient, was preparing them for the next trial. Ayanna stood and drew a deep breath. The ache of the curse still lingered, sharp and insistent, a reminder that her journey was far from over. Yet she felt a strange determination swelling inside her, a mix of courage, curiosity, and something she had not allowed herself to feel before: hope. Ethan returned from his patrol, his expression calm but serious. "The Watcher is close," he said. "I felt it near the ridge. It is testing us, preparing for something. We need to move carefully." Ayanna nodded, slipping her hand into his. "Then let's face it. Whatever it is, we face it together." They made their way through the valley toward the heart of the forest, where the trees grew tall and close, their roots twisted like ancient serpents under the soil. Here the air was heavier, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint, metallic tang of unseen forces. Shadows danced at the corners of her vision, shifting and moving as if alive. "This is where the land tests the heart," Ethan said quietly. "We must trust each other completely. That is the only way forward." Ayanna tightened her grip on his hand, feeling the steadiness of his presence anchor her. "I trust you," she said. The words felt strange on her tongue, but also powerful. For years she had believed that no one could stand with her, could understand the pain she carried. And yet here he was, unwavering, patient, and kind. The deeper they went into the forest, the more the shadows thickened. The trees seemed to lean closer, their gnarled branches reaching for them. Whispers swirled in the wind, voices both familiar and strange, echoing memories of past betrayals, losses, and fears. Ayanna's heart beat faster, her body tense. She felt the old ache pulse through her again, sharper this time, as though the curse itself was aware of their progress. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shifted, and a mist rose from the soil. Ayanna stumbled, and the world around her seemed to dissolve. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the forest. She stood in a mirrored version of the valley, dark and distorted. The mountains loomed higher, twisted and jagged, and the rivers ran black, reflecting the stormy sky above. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of sorrow. Ayanna realized she had entered the shadow realm, a place where the curse manifested in its purest form. "Ethan," she called, panic creeping into her voice. "I'm here," he replied, stepping from the mist. His figure was solid and real, but the shadows around him seemed to press closer, testing their bond. "Stay close to me," he said. "Do not let the shadows divide us." The first trial came swiftly. From the darkness emerged visions of Ayanna's worst fears: Ethan leaving her, turning against her, or being harmed because of her. Each illusion was sharp, vivid, and painful. Ayanna staggered, heart pounding, tears pricking her eyes. "You cannot face this alone," Ethan said firmly, taking her hand. "Look at me, not the shadows. Trust me, trust us." Ayanna focused on him, drawing her courage from his calm presence. Slowly the visions began to fade, replaced by memories of shared laughter, quiet moments, and trust built over days of hardship. The shadow realm recoiled, hissing and writhing as if angered by their unity. But the trial was far from over. The ground trembled and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the valley: "Only one may leave. One must stay to carry the pain forever." Ayanna froze, her stomach twisted, fear and doubt clawing at her. "What does it mean?" she whispered. Ethan's jaw set, his eyes hard with determination. "It is a test. The shadow wants to divide us, to make us doubt each other, but we cannot let it. We face it together or we fail separately." The mist thickened, forming a wall of darkness between them. Within it, shapes moved, whispering accusations, fears, and regrets. Iana felt herself pulled toward the darkness, her old instincts urging her to flee, to isolate herself as she always had. "No," she cried, gripping Ethan's hand tightly. "I will not run this time." He smiled faintly, pride shining through his serious expression. "Good, then we move forward together." They stepped into the darkness and the shadows lashed out, forming spectral hands and faces that reached for them. Yana felt the ache of the curse spike, but she did not pull back. She pressed closer to Ethan, feeling the warmth of his hand, the steady rhythm of his heart. Together, they became a single force against the shadows. Yana realized something then. The curse was never meant to destroy her. It was a reflection of her own fear, her own past pain, and if she faced it with courage, it could be transformed. The shadows screamed and writhed, but slowly, the darkness began to fracture. Light shimmered along the edges of the mist, growing brighter with each step they took. Yana felt the weight of years of sorrow lift, replaced by a strange, buoyant strength. Finally, they reached the heart of the shadow realm, a pool of black water swirling with dark energy. The surface shimmered with visions of the past, present, and possible futures. Yana gazed into it, her breath catching. She saw herself alone, her heart heavy, and then beside her, Ethan, steadfast and loyal. "You are stronger than your fear," Ethan said softly, kneeling beside her, "and together we are stronger than any shadow." Yana reached into the water. The dark images twisted and turned, then dissolved into light. The curse had not vanished entirely, but it had been challenged, weakened by their trust and courage. She felt the ache in her body ease, replaced by a warmth that spread through her chest. But the shadow realm was not finished. From the pool rose a figure, tall and imposing, its eyes burning with dark fire. It spoke without moving its lips. "You may have faced the first trials, but the heart alone cannot conquer the tide. One choice remains: surrender to fear or embrace love fully, without hesitation." Yana looked at Ethan, her heart racing. Fear pressed against her chest, but so did a new feeling, something fragile, bright, and fierce: love. She realized then that her trust in him, her willingness to face the pain with him, was the final key. "I choose us," she said, voice trembling but certain. Ethan's eyes softened and he smiled. "And I choose you, always." Together they pressed their hands into the water. A brilliant light erupted, washing over the shadow realm. The darkness screamed, then shattered like glass, leaving only a calm, silvered reflection of the valley. The trial was over. Yana breathed deeply, relief flooding her. She turned to Ethan, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "Yes," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Together." The mist lifted and they found themselves back in the forest, the trees standing tall and silent around them. The valley seemed to breathe again, the air lighter, the wind gentler. The land had acknowledged their courage, their unity, and their love. But even as they walked back toward the open plains, Ayana could feel the subtle pull of the shadow, distant but persistent. The curse had been challenged, but it was not gone. The land still remembered, still waited for the next test. At night, as they camped under a sky filled with stars, the feather pulsed once more in her hand. Words formed faintly along its surface. "The heart is strong, but the tide will return. Be ready." Yana looked at Ethan, her chest filled with a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something else, anticipation. "The shadow, it's not finished, is it?" she asked softly. "No," he said, squeezing her hand. "But we are ready. Whatever comes next, we face it together. And this time we know we can endure it." She nodded, letting herself lean against him, feeling the steady strength of his presence. For the first time in her life, she did not feel the ache alone. The shadow might rise again, but she knew that with Ethan beside her, she could face it, and perhaps even overcome it. And somewhere beyond the mountains, in the silent dark, the watcher stirred once more. Its eyes glimmered with a dangerous curiosity, knowing that Ayana and Ethan's bond had grown stronger, and that the trials ahead would test not just their courage, but the very depth of their hearts. The valley was alive, the shadow realm had been challenged, and the tide of power was rising. Cliffhanger. Part 4 promises the final confrontation, redemption, and the resolution of the curse and their love. The valley dawned under a sky painted with gold and rose, soft clouds drifting like slow-moving spirits across the horizon. The air was still, almost expectant, as if the land itself held its breath. Iana stood at the edge of the ridge, gazing at the valley below, the memory of the shadow realm still fresh in her mind. She could feel the pulse of the curse beneath her skin, a low hum that reminded her that the battle was not yet over. Ethan joined her quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice steady but gentle. Iana nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "I am. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Together, they began their descent into the heart of the valley, where the land had first begun to stir the curse. The path was familiar yet changed. The rivers moved slower, the trees leaned in closer, and the wind carried faint whispers of warnings. They could feel eyes upon them, unseen and patient, watching every step. At the base of the valley lay the pool of black water, the same pool that had tested Iana in the shadow realm. But now it was alive in a different way. The water shimmered like molten silver, reflecting not just the sky but their own hearts, showing strength and fear intertwined. The Watcher, the shadow that had followed them since the beginning, emerged from the mist, tall and dark, its presence both threatening and magnetic. "You have come far," the shadow said, voice like rolling thunder. "But the heart alone cannot end what has begun. Only one may leave, one must bear the pain while the other finds freedom." Iana froze, fear gnawing at her chest. But she looked at Ethan and saw no hesitation, no doubt. His eyes held only steadfast determination, a calm that belied the storm around them. And in that instant she knew they would not face this alone. "We do not separate," she said firmly, her voice echoing across the valley. "We face it together or not at all." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Together," he echoed. The shadow hissed, its form shifting and writhing as though offended by their unity. Then it surged forward, attempting to drive a wedge between them, conjuring visions of betrayal, fear, and doubt. Iana saw herself alone again, stripped of support, and felt the familiar ache of the curse spike within her. But she refused to yield. Drawing on the trust and love she had found in Ethan, she stepped forward. "You cannot control us," she said, voice stronger now. "We are more than your darkness. Our hearts are our own, and we face the light together." Ethan stepped beside her, his presence a shield and a beacon. "The shadow tests, but it cannot break what is true," he said. "We are stronger than fear." The ground trembled beneath them, and the air shimmered with power. The shadow roared, a sound that rattled the bones and stirred the trees. But with every step Iana and Ethan took toward the pool, the darkness began to fracture. Light spilled along the edges of the mist, bright and clear, weaving patterns of hope through the valley. Iana felt the pulse of the curse weaken, replaced by warmth. The pain that had haunted her body for so long was no longer sharp. It was tempered by the courage she had embraced, by the bond she had forged with Ethan. Every heartbeat, every breath carried strength she had never known she possessed. The shadow surged one last time, towering above them, its eyes blazing. "Only one may triumph," it shouted. Iana looked at Ethan, her eyes fierce. "Then we triumph together," she said. They stepped into the pool of silvered water, hands joined. Light erupted, blinding and pure, washing over the shadow. It screamed, twisting and writhing as its hold on the valley, and their hearts began to dissolve. The mist lifted, revealing the valley in its true form, calm, vibrant, and alive with the energy of renewal. The shadow fell away, shattered like shards of glass, leaving only a faint echo of its voice. The land remembers and will test again. Iana and Ethan stood in silence, breathing heavily, the warmth of their victory settling over them. The valley seemed to sigh in relief, the rivers flowing clear, the trees standing tall, the wind soft and gentle. Iana turned to Ethan, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. "We did it. The curse, it's broken." Ethan shook his head slightly. "Not broken," he said. "Transformed. The curse was never just about punishment. It was about understanding, trust, and courage. You have faced it, and you have grown stronger because of it." Yana smiled faintly, letting herself relax for the first time in years. She had carried the weight of the curse for so long that relief felt almost foreign. And yet now, standing beside Ethan, she felt whole, strong, loved, and free. The valley itself seemed to celebrate with them. Birds sang, the rivers sparkled in the sunlight, and the wind whispered through the trees like a gentle blessing. The land had accepted their courage, their unity, and their hearts. Ethan reached out and took her face in his hands. "You are not alone anymore," he said softly, "and you never will be. I will stand with you through every trial, every shadow, every storm, always." Yana felt her heart swell with a fierce joy. "And I will stand with you," she said, "through everything, forever." They embraced, a quiet moment of triumph and love, the weight of the curse finally lifting from their shoulders. Every ache, every fear, every shadow of the past seemed to dissolve in the light of their bond. But the land, patient and eternal, still held its mysteries. In the distance, a faint ripple of shadow moved across the mountains, a reminder that even as one trial ended, life and love would always be tested. Yana and Ethan did not fear it. They had faced the darkness together, and they knew that their hearts were stronger than any curse, any shadow, any challenge the world could place before them. As the sun climbed higher, painting the valley with light, Yana walked with Ethan toward the plains, hand in hand. Every step was lighter, freer, filled with the joy of shared victory. The feather, once a symbol of the curse, now rested in her pocket, warm and calm, as if acknowledging that its purpose had been fulfilled. The villagers who had watched the transformation of the land whispered in awe. Legends would grow from this day. Stories of two souls who had faced the curse of the valley, who had endured shadows and fear, and who had emerged stronger, united, and free. That evening, as the sky burned with the colors of sunset, Ayanna and Ethan stood atop the ridge, looking out over the valley that had tested them so deeply. "The land is calm," Ayanna said, her voice soft, "but I can still feel something watching." Ethan nodded. "Yes. The valley remembers everything, every heart, every shadow, but it will not harm us again, not now, not with what we have built. Our bond, our trust, our love that is stronger than any shadow." Yana leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his chest against hers. "Then we move forward," she said. "Together." "Together," Ethan repeated, smiling. For the first time, the valley seemed to breathe in harmony with them, the rivers singing, the trees standing proudly, the wind whispering a promise of peace. The curse had been faced, the shadow conquered, and the hearts of Ayanna and Ethan had been tested and proven unbreakable. Yet, even as they looked at the horizon, they knew that life would always hold trials. Shadows would rise again, storms would come, and the land would continue to challenge those who dared to love. But they were ready. Side by side, hand in hand, hearts bound together, they could face anything. As the night fell and the stars twinkled like distant fires, Ayanna whispered softly, "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ethan pressed his lips to her forehead. "Always." And somewhere in the valley, the wind carried their words, a gentle echo across the land. Love is stronger than fear, courage stronger than shadows. Together they rise. The valley slept, peaceful at last, knowing that its guardians, Ayanna and Ethan, were united, strong, and unafraid. And though the land would continue to remember, and though shadows might return in the distant future, one truth had been written in its soil forever. Love, courage, and trust endure beyond every curse.